every time there's a Muslim terrorist kills people, it's terrorism. It's said as terrorism. Politicians go crazy, right? But when a white supremacist does that right here in America, like what happened in Portland, or on May 20th to the U.S. Army second lieutenant, Richard Collins III, who is a black man, was murdered while visiting University of Maryland by a member of a Facebook group, the Alt-Reich Nation. It's just reported as kind of this lone wolf thing. And there's an article in The Intercept that is written by Mehdi Hassan that came out May 31st. The numbers don't lie. White far-right terrorists pose a clear danger to us all. And I'm going to read you some interesting statistic that this article goes into. So it first of all, it talks about, let's just look what's happened in the last couple years, right? So be it the shooter of 2 Hindus in a bar in Kansas in February, or the killer of 9 black worshipers in a church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, or the murder of 6 Sikh worshipers in a temple in Duffy's own state, because they talk about this Congressman Duffy from Wisconsin says it's not that big of a deal, right? He said that Islamists or jihadist terrorists, I don't know, but I would just tell you there's a difference between them and white nationalists, is what he said. There's just a difference, right? It's always a difference, like what happened in Canada. And this article, and then the 2 men that were killed and 1 injured in Portland. So what the article goes into is an excellent point about, can you imagine, what if the guy that killed the 2 people on the train in Portland was yelling Allahu Akbar, and he was a Muslim jihadist and did the exact same thing? He just came on and was hassling people, and 2 guys stepped in and died. Can you imagine how Fox News would be covering this? A jihadist on a train in Portland killed an army vet. They would be going bananas. But they don't want to say, and anytime, this article makes an excellent point, which is anytime a white supremacist does this, they always say, oh, he was mentally ill. He was suffering from mental illness, which is probably true. But a Muslim extremist isn't? So anyone is a jihadist, they're immune from mental illness? Mental illness is a human problem. It's a human issue. And it can then take the form, it can manifest itself in many awful forms. And you can be susceptible to white supremacist groups or extreme Muslim groups or whatever. So I'm going to read you some numbers that are in this article. Since September 12, 2001, noted a recent report prepared for Congress by the Government Accountability Office, the number of fatalities caused by domestic violent extremists has ranged from 1 to 49 in a given year. Fatalities resulting from attacks by far right-wing violent extremists have exceeded those caused by radical Islamic violent extremists in 10 of the 15 years. So 10 of the last 15 years, far-right white extremists have killed more people than Muslim terrorists. And were the same in 3 of the years since September 12th. So 10 of the 15 were worse. 3 more years were the same. So only 2 out of 15 years were there more people killed from Muslim extremists than the far right white supremacists. Interesting statistic. It's weird. I don't see that on Fox News ticker. The report continues, of the 85 violent extremist incidents that resulted in deaths in September 12, 2001, far right-wing violent extremist groups were responsible for 62, that's 73%, while radical Islamist violent extremists were responsible for 23. That's only 27%. That's a margin of almost 3 to 1. The report points out that the total number of fatalities is about the same for far right-wing violent extremists and radical Islamist violent extremists over the approximately 15-year period. Okay. With the latter edging out the former by 119 to 106. However, the report also acknowledges that 41% of the deaths attributable to radical Islamist violent extremists occurred in a single event, an attack at Orlando, Florida nightclub in 2016. So even if they're the same, then shouldn't we have the same response? How come we're not drone striking white nationalist militia groups here in America? We know where they are. The FBI surely knows where they are. Department of Homeland Security surely must know where they are. We're not targeting them. They're posting Nazi stuff on their Facebook pages and stuff like that. There's a Facebook group that killed an Army lieutenant at the University of Maryland a couple weeks ago. And we're just going to send the regular cops after this? This isn't a terrorist threat? This is what's such bullshit to me. It's unbelievable. And of course, not with Trump in the office, he wouldn't even acknowledge what happened in Portland. It's unbelievable. And here's why. And this is what I'll read this last paragraph and then I'll tell you what I think. Why would a president who has repeatedly retweeted white supremacist Twitter accounts, such as White Genocide Trademark, appointed a white nationalist to be one of his delegates in California, accepted campaign donations from white nationalist leaders, picked a white nationalist and his chief strategist in the White House, and been officially endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, want to turn a blind eye to domestic terror threat from white supremacists and nationalists and put American lives in danger? Couldn't possibly imagine. Yeah, he's got Nazis in the goddamn White House. But I'll tell you what else. So obviously there's those white nationalists that helped him get elected. But we need to have instability in countries in the Middle East. We need war there. So we need terrorism to go get the money and the oil. I'm not denying any of the fact that also Trump and his team are a bunch of racists, and there's a bunch of racist politicians, mainly in the Republican Party, but plenty, there's some in the Democratic Party for sure, that won't come out and say this. This is an act of terrorism. American citizens are being killed. It's an act of terrorism. These are organized groups, just like a terror cell. And they're even better organized. But that's not good. There's not a lot of money in that, probably. There's more money in going overseas and doing all of that to get oil and everything. Here we can just set up our own oil pipelines, and we send militarized cops and the police to, water cannon Native Americans on their own soil. But the white nationalists, lucky for them, they're not getting in the way of oil. They're getting in the way of oil and profits. Maybe we'd go after them a little more. It's unbelievable to me, this hypocrisy. We need this Islamophobic nonsense to justify our $2 trillion in wars for the last 16 years in the Middle East. And then when awful shit is happening here by white supremacist groups, like did we scream terrorism after Oklahoma City 20 some years ago? Did we go after them? Nah. We set up special task force. Did we all sign away our private rights of privacy like the Patriot Act after 9/11? Nah, we didn't. It's unbelievable. And this is what happens even more so with Trump in the White House. So call these dicks out on their bullshit. And if you live in Wisconsin, let this idiot Duffy know. Let Shawn Duffy in Wisconsin know what you think about him. Where is he? Any politician that represents you, that has screamed loudly about Muslim terrorists, ask them about what just happened in Portland or the University of Maryland, and ask them to speak out about that and say it's terrorism. Let's cut the shit. Thanks for supporting the show.